My name's Jeff DeLong. I'm a senior manager with Global Partner Enablement. Our team creates various forms of content for partners, primarily online training, but also, as we're going to talk about today, reference architectures, along with other forms of enablement content. So today we're going to talk about reference architectures. This is a definition from Wiki of a reference architecture. Basically, it says that a reference architecture is a software architecture that provides a template solution for an architecture for a particular domain. Now, the term reference architecture gets used a lot in our industry for various sorts of things related to this definition. So, for instance, Red Hat has a group under Vijay Taran that does reference architectures. These are very detailed architectures, typically combining hardware and software and very detailed instructions on how to install the software on that particular piece of hardware. I was talking with someone else in our Paris office a month or so ago, talking to them about reference architectures, and they said, "Do you mean like IBM Redbooks?" Another form of reference architectures. I will say that what we're doing is not nearly as complex or as detailed as what Vijay's team or IBM Redbooks consist of. But they are architectures in the sense that they attempt to provide a template for a particular solution or use case around some of our Red Hat products. So the goals of GPE reference architectures are primarily to provide an extension to our open online partner training. Our training classes we think are pretty good, but there's only so much you can cover in a few days. Most of our online classes we expect a student to take anywhere from say 16, 24, maybe 32 hours of work over a several-week period. But basically, what we can cover in that time frame is the basics of a product, whether it be Fuse ServiceWorks or BPMS Suite or CloudForms or something, because these products are complex and they do a lot, and there's a lot that we need to cover. So we feel we get the partners up to a basic understanding of the products and how to use them, and in a sense, how to be dangerous with them. But there's still a lot of aspects of the products that we aren't able to cover in the training. And it would be difficult to provide training content around all of those in the context of a set session because just there are so many different things that you would do. And not all of them are interesting to every student taking the class. So reference architectures provide us really an extension to this training. What we're trying to build out is a series of really sophisticated examples that show various things you would want to do with the products that aren't covered in the training. So they're really there to demonstrate some of the more complex use cases that we come across. And generally, these are based on commonly asked questions from our partners. They take the training, they get into a project or POC, and they come up with questions like, what's the best way to deploy and Fuse ServiceWorks and BPMN Suite and integrate between the two products, or how can we interface with BPM Suite using JMS, or what's the best JMS provider for Fuse ServiceWorks, and how would I describe that in a clustered configuration, set up a clustered configuration, and those sorts of things. And a side goal of these reference architectures is it allows us to explore PaaS-specific topologies. So, we get to try out a bunch of stuff in OpenShift. Like, gee, how would that really work if we tried to do that in OpenShift? What are the limitations of that? What things do we have to work around because we're in a platform as a service environment, and maybe we don't have all of the things that we're used to having when we have software deployed on a virtual machine or in bare metal. So this allows us to explore these use cases in an OpenShift environment, and by doing so, we're learning a lot about how platform as a service can really work. We're also, as it turns out, administering our own platform as a service to host these environments, host these reference architectures, and gaining a lot of experience that we can then pass on to our partners. So most of the discussion today is going to be around a particular reference architecture. It's one of the first ones we've created, and it's around Fuse ServiceWorks BPMS integration. Now, you might say, gee, doesn't that come out of the box with Fuse ServiceWorks? I mean, we have a BPM component in SwitchYard. Why wouldn't I just use that? Well, you might. It depends on what your requirements are. If your processes are very short-lived, then the Fuse ServiceWorks BPM support is very good. If you don't need any human task support, if you don't require business activity monitoring, several other things. If you don't require those, then and you're primarily orchestrating SwitchYard services, then the Fuse ServiceWorks BPM integration is a good way to go. But if you do have human tasks, or if you have long-running processes, or if you want to exploit business activity monitoring in BPM Suite, or if you just like the idea of a standalone process server, process engine, which many people do, many partners that we work with are used to the idea of my ESB layer being different than my process orchestration layer, and so they come at it from that angle. And if you're willing to pay for multiple subscriptions to both Fuse ServiceWorks and BPM Suite, then you'd like to be able to have both of those products stand alone and integrate with each other. The question is, how would you go about doing that? What are some of the best practices for doing that? So here I have a deployment diagram, and don't get too hung up on the exact specifics of it, because it's something that was whipped up rather recently. So I haven't had a chance to really clean it up. But what it is trying to show is that there are really two nodes. In this case, they're two different gears because we're deploying this in OpenShift. So we have a Fuse ServiceWorks gear and a BPMS 6 gear. And then within those gears, we have different components. Within our Fuse ServiceWorks gear, we have a couple SwitchYard services. One SwitchYard service will actually manage the process lifecycle, meaning it will start processes and query and complete tasks. The other service is a simple service that's basically there to be invoked from the JBPM process to show how the how that integration would work. And then we also see in this gear Hornet Queue, which we use for the client to send us some messages, as well as the MySQL database that supports the persistence requirements of Fuse ServiceWorks. In our other gear, we have BPMS 6. And primarily what's there is Business Central, which is a web application, and MySQL. Now within Business Central, we have a couple different components. I didn't talk about the design time components within Business Central. They're there, but I didn't want to make the diagram too complex. Basically, I wanted to focus on the runtime aspects, and so what I have in the diagram here is the execution server. So Christina just pinged me that, can you please show the architecture diagram too? Do you not see the diagram? Are you seeing the slide before the deployment diagram? Are you seeing any slides? Not really. Okay. Okay. Somehow the screen sharing stopped. Not sure how. I've just started it again. Can you see my screen now? Okay. Okay, sorry about that. I did send out slides, the presentation before, about a half hour ago, but I'm not sure if Quentin had a chance to just to send that around to everybody. In any case, what I've talked about now was basically bullets on the slide. So if you heard and understood what I said, then no worse. But please tell me and stop me if it stops screen sharing again. So this is a deployment diagram. And hopefully it's projecting well enough for you to see it. I'll start over again that there are two OpenShift gears. One has Fuse ServiceWorks, one has BPMS 6. In the Fuse ServiceWorks node, we have two switchyard services. One will send messages to the BPMS 6 gear to start the process and complete tasks. The other will be invoked by the process through a REST service task. There's also within the Fuse ServiceWorks gear Hornet Queue to support the client, and MySQL for persistence. In the BPMS 6 gear, we have Business Central, and as I was saying, what I'm emphasizing is the runtime aspects of Business Central, which is the execution server. So the execution server is really a logical, part of the Business Central web application. And mainly what it does, well, among other things, is it presents a REST interface to the outside world. So the switchyard process lifecycle management service can send REST commands to the execution server to start a process. Now, within that execution server, we have the idea of deployment units, where deployment units basically consist of KJARs that have been downloaded from a Maven repository. In this case, this gear is self-contained, so the Maven repository is really right there in this environment. But again, I didn't elaborate on the Maven repository aspect of it, because that's not that important for the what we're trying to show. And this deployment unit then consists of a business process primarily, that one of the things it does, one of its tasks, is a REST service, a REST service task that invokes the service over on the Switchyard Fuse ServiceWorks gear. And there's also a MySQL database to support the BPMS 6 persistence requirements. So now I'm going to start showing some things, and I'll move them over into my onto my screen that I'm sharing. And each of those is going to take probably a little bit of time for you to see. So I'll go slow to make sure that there's time for you to see what I'm talking about. Fortunately, I do have a little window that shows me what you're seeing, so I can see now that my browser has popped up and you should be able to see it. So what we have in this browser is my OpenShift admin console, and you see that I have two applications. One is the BPMS application, the other is the Fuse ServiceWorks application. And if you look at the URL, and the URL may be a bit tough for you to read, but it says broker OO-RHPDS-OSC.OpenTLC.com/console/applications. And so this is in our sort of quasi-private platform as a service that we've installed and are maintaining for our partners to have access to. Now, I will say that this is all very new, and we don't actually have any partners consuming this OpenShift service yet, but we will be rolling it out very shortly, so you're really seeing like a preview of it. If you look at it, it looks a lot like OpenShift Online, except there in OpenShift Online, you may not be able to get these same cartridges. I believe there is a BPMS cartridge now. It's a little different than this one. I'll talk about these cartridges here in a little bit. But so I've created, using our BPMS cartridge and our Fuse ServiceWorks cartridge, I've created two applications in OpenShift. And next, I want to show you them. First, I'll show you this is the JBoss admin console. One of the things we do in our gears is we expose the admin console. Now, typically the admin console is on port 9990, and that was intentional to not put the admin console on port 8080. You know, years ago we used to have the admin console on port 8080. One of the complaints was, well, gee, then port 8080 is exposed outside my firewall. People can get at my admin console. Users, I don't want them doing that. So in EAP6, we put the admin console on 9990. So typically it wouldn't be exposed through the firewall, and hence only people that can get it are inside the firewall. Unfortunately, that paradigm doesn't really go over very well in platform as a service, because your developer is oftentimes outside the firewall and needs to be able to administer their application server. For example, they need to be able to upload, in this case, they need to be able to deploy applications. So you can see here, hopefully you can see this detail, that I've deployed the process quote and the process instance management applications, which are switchyard services. And there are other things I needed to be able to do to make this environment work. I needed to create a JMS destination. So here we see I have a process management queue. And I also needed to be able to create some system properties. In particular, two system properties, a BPMS server exec server host name and a BPMS exec server port. I had to define those because in my at design time, when I'm creating these switchyard services, I have no idea where the BPMS suite is going to be running. And so I use system properties, which can be looked up at runtime from the environment. So we'll come back and look at this console later. We'll look at some of the metrics. So now we're looking at my BPM suite console, my Business Central console, and I have my business process. It's called Policy Quote Process Map up. And again, it might be a little tough to see the details. I'm not sure what the resolution's coming through to you, but what I have hovered on here is the send results, which is the fourth task in the process, is a REST service task. And you can see I've highlighted the assignments. And in the assignments, I have a URL which says http://fsw-jddemo.apps. Well, that's the URL for my Fuse ServiceWorks cartridge. So that's how I know, or one of the parameters, one of the properties that I need to specify in order for this REST service to call back onto this, onto the Fuse ServiceWorks server and invoke this switchyard service. Okay. Next, I want to look at JBoss Developer Studio. Okay, and so what you see here is my switchyard composite application, and I have a service defined that has a JMS binding, a JMS composite binding, that's for that policy quote queue that that we just looked at, process management queue. And then I have a Java Bean component, and basically this Java Bean component has the logic that's going to start the process. It does that through this process lifecycle reference. And then after the process is started, it goes and queries for and completes the human task. Now, we could do the human task through the Business Central console, but that would make it more awkward for testing, particularly if we wanted to do some load testing. So this example, this reference architecture actually does this in an automated way so that we could actually do load under this and send 100 processes and have them all started and completed. These references have REST bindings, okay? And the REST interfaces are provided by something we call process instance lifecycle resource, and it has the various resources defined. So for instance, here we see there's a @post @path process /process ID /start. Well, that defines the REST interface that you can use through the execution server to start a process. We have others defined to do other things, like complete a task and such. Okay. And same thing for the task lifecycle. It's also a reference that uses the BPMS 6 execution server REST interfaces. And then our other switchyard service is a very simple one. It's also, or in this case, it's exposed through a REST binding. And it has a simple bean service that basically prints out a message onto the console. And we'll see that when we demonstrate it. So I'm going through this fairly slowly. Please ping me in the chat if there's some aspect of this that you want to see more details on. Obviously, there's a lot behind this. If you're familiar with either Fuse ServiceWorks or BPM Suite, there's more details behind this, probably more than I can go over in the 45 or 50 minutes that I have. I will in a minute get you the URL for this on GitHub, and so you can pull it down and play with it and look at it and such. So, okay. Next thing I want to do is show you a couple console windows. Okay. Okay. And this first one is the is my SSH logged into my BPMS cartridge. So if you can see this, again, I'm not sure what the resolution looks like for you. BPMS-JD-demo-apps ... And here I've tailed the log. Okay. And next I have another console. And this one's for Fuse ServiceWorks. And while it's coming up, I'll talk a little bit more about it. So I'll get to more of this as I wrap up, but there are a lot of nice things about this. One of the nice things is, about running an OpenShift is, gee, I don't have to worry about the fact that I'm running two different, basically, instances of VAP on the same machine and mess around with my ports and things like that, or worry about, do I have enough memory really to do that? Since all this stuff is running in the cloud, all I really have to remember is what is this URL and SSH URL to get into these environments. And for those, I've created a little cheat sheet that has my various SSH commands and URLs plugged into them and such. So this one is the FSW cartridge. And you can see I've been doing some testing beforehand just to make sure it continues to work. It's always the fear when you're demoing. And then the final thing I want to pull in, the final console. This is my load test console. And so I have a JMeter client that I can run. So Maven Clean Verify. Let's see, it hasn't showed up on yours yet. Okay, there it goes. All right. Maven Clean Verify. Okay, and now you might start seeing things scroll in the two consoles. Hopefully that was picked up. In any case, what it says at the end of the BPM Suite console is you know, send results on exit, policy quote process map, process completed. And down here we see the details of the of the message, and then about to complete task with task ID. Okay. So that may be a little bit hard to look at, but there's a couple other things we can look at to see how our process is doing. So I'm going to move those back out of the way onto my other screen. Does help to have a lot of screen real estate when you're doing these sorts of things, since you might have 2 or 3 command prompts open, 4 or 5 browser windows, JBoss Developer Studio, notes that you're taking, documentation you're reading, and those sorts of things. Okay, now we're back to our BPM Suite screen. And I want to next bring you over to, I've pulled up the BAM dashboard. Again, this is going to take a minute for it to, or at least a few seconds for it to show up where you can see it. And we see that well, we only have one process that we've been running. So we've had 8 processes. They're all of the same type, policy quote process map. They were all started by the user JBoss. And there's also 8 task instances with them. And you also would see up here that only 7 were completed. 1 was aborted. The first one I ran, I had a bug and typed something wrong in the in one of the URL strings, and it didn't work. Now, if I go over to my JBoss Management Console now and go to the runtime, go to my switch yard. Now, you will notice that the message counts aren't the same. And, well, that has to do with that switch yard counts are they recycle back to 0 when you reboot the server. And I ran a couple yesterday. And then when I started this morning, I rebooted my servers. And so my service metrics don't quite line up with the BAM metrics, which are persistent in a database. But if I was to go back to the BAM dashboard and look at it by date, then they should line up. And of course, it shows average count, average time, and sort of the other things that you would see in the switch yard metrics. And if I spend a little more time with this, and I haven't looked into this yet, we could look at this in RTGov. All right, so and if you have any questions, put them in the chat. So now what we have is a scenario diagram, and I include this just to kind of review what this what the message flow looked like, because it might have been might not have been apparent to you. So, the first thing we have is a JMeter client, our load test client, and it sends in a message, a JMS message that has something called operation equals REST API in the selector, and that's just used in the to do the selection in the binding, and that's to allow for future enhancement where we might want to do sort of multiple things and use that selector in different ways. Use the same queue in different ways. The message is consumed off of that queue, and there is something called the switchyard service. It's the process lifecycle management service, and it issues a start process command over REST to our BPM process engine or execution server. I clean this up and call it execution server to be in sync with the other diagram. And then the process lifecycle management queries for potential tasks, claims the task, starts the task, completes the task. So this is a human task. Then the task engine completes, and the next service or the next task is a service task, the REST service task, back in the Fuse service works, which is our policy quote, and then it completes and prints out the message on the screen. Okay, so that was really the demonstration, which is the main part of what I wanted to show you. So let's talk about this in a little more detail. First of all, if you wanted to look at this, where could you go? Well, here's we're creating these out on GitHub to make them easily accessible to partners as well as Red Hat employees. So there's the URL, and again, it's in the presentation that I distributed. And I would start with the README, and that then contains links to our documentation. And let me just bring up the document for a minute. So Jeff Bride was actually the author of this reference architecture. And you can see here's the README. So if you click on the README, all right, this is taking a second for you to appear on your screens. There it goes. All right, it's going to be hard to scroll through this given the time lag, but basically there's a purpose, there's a purpose. Discuss use cases for integration between Fuse Service Works and BPM Suite 6, demonstrate integration of the two products using REST APIs, provide a harness to drive load testing of integration layer between the two products. It then goes on to discuss various other aspects of it, how to install it. It has various diagrams and that sort of thing, etc. So you can read through that, you can follow through it, and try it out yourself. Now, one of the things it says is fairly early on is in order to run this, deploy this example and run this reference architecture, you require a Fuse Service Works gear and a BPMS gear. You might think, well, where in the heck am I going to get one of those? And I'm not going to go through all that detail today. However, I am on tomorrow at 1 p.m. in the partner track, going to be talking about, well, primarily I'll talk about Open and all the classes that we offer and the accreditations and that sort of thing. But an hour into that or so, I'll get to partner demo system, and I'll show you a couple of things that we're able to do in the new partner demo system. So we're rolling out a new partner demo system, and one of the things that's going to have is a OpenShift based, an OpenShift PaaS environment to use for demos. And so most of these reference architectures that we're creating are going to run in that OpenShift environment, and you'll be able to deploy them into that environment, and there'll be instructions for how to do that. And partners will be able to come to us, get an account on this private platform as a service that we're providing, and then they can deploy these demos and test them out and show them to their customers and etc. Now, I do want to note that these gears are provisioned with GPE custom Fuse ServiceWorks and BPMS6 cartridges. These are not Red Hat supported cartridges. Those will come later in the year or at some point, I believe, based on the new Docker architecture. But we had a need for these to host our training classes, so we created them. And one of the things about our approach is that we created RPMs out of Fuse ServiceWorks and BPMS Suite 6 so that the downloadable part of the cartridge is very thin, very light, because the RPMs are already deployed onto the OpenShift nodes. So. So what are the benefits of using OpenShift for this? Well, first of all, the partner doesn't have to install any server software. So how many times have we been in an environment with a partner? Gee, I'd like to do a demo. I'd like to show it to my customer. I need to do it next week. Gee, I need to install all that software. Can you get somebody on site to help me? We have, even predating these reference architectures, we have been successful with partners by in previous cases, by able to deploy an example, deploy a demo onto OpenShift Online, give the partner access, and have them go show the client. This greatly reduces the time for a partner to put together a demo. It greatly accelerates the sales cycle for the partner. So they don't have to install any software. They also don't have to manage any server software. We may update from BPMS 601 to 602 or whatever the next release is, and we can do that transparently to the partner. They don't have to be worrying about that sort of thing. And we can check out whether the demo still works in that environment before they try it. The environment is available, I'd say, almost 24/7 because, it's not a production SLA, so there may be times when it's down. Although I haven't experienced that in all the testing I've been doing, but again, it could go down. But I could be anywhere really in the world and access this through my internet. So I could have done the same demo if I was in the Singapore office. Another benefit is that the partner, someone from Red Hat, the customer, they don't have to be in the same room. They can easily all access the same environment. They could even play different roles in the demonstration. It also helps to minimize cost. There's always going to be some cost to putting things out in the cloud, but OpenShift allows us to, with really only a few virtual machines. In fact, the one I'm using right now, both the broker and the node are on the same VM, and we could support probably 20 or so demo environments that were being used sporadically through the day in that. In our training environment, we put between 20 and 25 people on the same node, same say 4 gigabyte. Well, no, a little bit more than that node, and our 4 gigabyte node, and no problems with supporting that many partners again doing labs. Of course, this isn't production. This is just we use it in training. We use it for doing demos and things like that. Also, the examples work in OpenShift, and this creates confidence not only in the JBoss middleware, but in OpenShift as well. So we're really, learning about OpenShift and exploiting OpenShift and showing how great OpenShift is. At the same time, we're showing how great our middleware is. So we have a couple reference architectures that we've completed. They're out there on GitHub. I should say there's also a template that you can use to clone to create one. Besides the Few ServiceWorks BPMS integration example, we have one that shows integration with Altova MapForce. Now, this is a fairly minor one, but it was interesting that today, there was a thread today that talked about, the lack of a mapping product, a data mapping product. And one of the other essays responded saying, hey, I've had people at Accenture recommend Altova to me. Well, turns out I've recommended Altova to people at Accenture as well. So yes, it'd be nice if we had our own, but the reality is there's one out there. It's not that expensive. A customer can use it, and what they create will create a map, an XSLT that can be used in in a switchyard service. So we demonstrate doing that and the steps to create that. Another is around JMS, a JMS execution server. So we've talked about REST, but what if I wanted to do all this through JMS? Another explores the various capabilities of BPM service tasks. We find out that there's a lot of different flavors of service tasks. Different, it's unclear what all the functionality is. So we've created some reference architecture examples to kind of exploit those and demonstrate some of those capabilities. And then finally, we have a few in progress. One of the team members is creating one based on RTGov. So what we want to do here is deploy RTGov in a separate gear from our switchyard runtime, create some CEP-style rules that will basically analyze the response time events that RTGov collects, and then use those rules to actually scale the switchyard gears. Okay, so scaling, through the switchyard scaling REST interface. Now, the only glitch in this is that RTGov doesn't really support CEP truly at this point. So in terms of things like, well, in particular, it doesn't have a way to configure stream mode, which means you can't use sliding windows. So initially, we'll have to fake it, but we've talked with the development teams, and they'll plan to implement again, stream mode and the other things you need for actual real CEP style rules. But that's another aspect of these reference architectures. We try them out and find things that maybe don't quite work, and then we can document that and walk through the partner, how to work around those. Another one that we're working on is on DTGov, and in this case, we'll again deploy DTGov in a separate switchyard gear, separate gear from the switchyard runtime, demonstrate the governance process, explore the role of DTGov in a continuous integration process, Maven integration, and those sorts of things. And then we're also working on one for a message cluster with Few ServiceWorks. So in one case, we'll actually have two flavors of this, one based on Hornet Queue, one based on ActiveMQ and Fabric, and create a clustered environment, clustered JMS environment, and kind of figure out how that works in an OpenShift PaaS environment. So that's it. And that's good because we're running out of time. If you have any questions, I guess enter them in the chat. I don't know if they're opening this up for everyone to ask questions verbally, but if not, thank you. You've been a great audience. Kind of a joke. No, I'm sure you've been fun. I hope that you were able to follow this, being that was delivered remotely. I wish I could have been there in Bangkok with the rest of you. I'm glad. I'm sorry it didn't turn out that way, but in any case, I would love to see all you guys again. Enjoyed the times in the past when we have gotten together in Singapore years ago, and hope to see you again sometime in the near future. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop sharing so that the next speaker can get set up. If you have any questions, send me an email, jdelong@redhat.com. Thanks, everyone. Bye.